Ever wondered how people survived bitter winter cold before central heating? Could you handle a medieval winter without your trusty thermostat? Number 10. The humble bed warmer. Did you know that medieval folks had their own version of an electric blanket? Long before electricity was even a concept, people in the Middle Ages came up with clever ways to avoid slipping between ice-cold sheets at bedtime. The bed warmer was a simple yet genius invention that made freezing winter nights a little more bearable for our ancestors. A typical medieval bed warmer consisted of a metal pan with a long handle and a lid that could be filled with hot embers from the fireplace. The pan would be slid between the sheets to warm the bed before sleeping. Imagine the luxury of climbing into a preheated bed when the temperature outside was plummeting. These warming pans were often made of brass or copper, which conducted heat efficiently, and featured decorative lids with holes that allowed the heat to disperse evenly throughout the bedding. For those who couldn't afford metal warming pans, hot stones wrapped in cloth served the same purpose. These stones would be heated by the fire throughout the evening and then carefully wrapped in fabric to prevent burns before being placed at the foot of the bed. The heat would radiate slowly throughout the night, providing hours of warmth for cold feet. What's particularly fascinating about bed warmers is how long they remained in use. The basic design hardly changed for centuries, proving that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. These warming devices remained popular well into the Victorian era, only falling out of favor when modern heating methods became widespread. Number 9. Strategic sleeping arrangements. Ever thought about how the layout of your bedroom might affect your warmth? Medieval people certainly did. In times when heating an entire home was impractical and expensive, medieval families developed strategic sleeping arrangements that maximized warmth with minimal fuel consumption. The typical medieval home wasn't designed with privacy in mind. Entire families often slept in the same room, and for good reason: body heat. By gathering everyone together in a single chamber, families could benefit from each other's natural warmth. This pragmatic approach to sleeping arrangements meant that individual bedrooms were a luxury few could afford, both financially and thermally. Beds themselves were constructed with winter in mind. The famous four-poster beds weren't just status symbols, they served a practical purpose. Thick curtains would be drawn around the bed, creating a microclimate that trapped body heat and blocked drafts. These bed curtains functioned like a room within a room, providing an additional layer of insulation against the cold. In the humblest homes, sleeping quarters were often located directly above the kitchen or main hearth. Heat naturally rises, so positioning sleeping areas on upper floors or above heat sources made perfect thermal sense. Farmers took this concept even further. In some rural areas, particularly in colder regions, livestock would be housed on the ground floor of the dwelling, with the family living above. The animal's body heat would rise through the floorboards, providing natural underfloor heating. Even the positioning of beds against interior walls rather than exterior ones was a deliberate choice to avoid the chill that radiated from outside walls. These sleeping strategies reveal a sophisticated understanding of heat conservation that modern energy efficiency experts would appreciate. Number 8. Animal-powered heating. Did you know that medieval households used living, breathing heating systems? Before the Industrial Revolution, people leveraged the natural body heat of animals in surprisingly ingenious ways to stay warm during frigid winters. Dogs earned their title of man's best friend, in part because of their thermal contributions. The term three-dog night originated from the practice of sleeping with dogs on particularly cold nights: 1 dog for a chilly night, 2 for a cold night, and 3 dogs for the bitterest winter conditions. These canine bed warmers provided consistent heat throughout the night, with the added benefit of loyalty and protection. But dogs weren't the only thermal companions. Cats were valued not just for their mousing skills, but also for their warmth. A purring cat in your lap while spinning or sewing provided a small but welcome source of heat during long winter evenings. Some medieval illustrations show cats curled up near people's feet as they worked at looms or writing desks, a medieval foot warmer that fed itself and caught mice. For rural households, the arrangement went beyond pets. As mentioned earlier, livestock often shared living quarters with humans during winter. In Nordic countries and other extremely cold regions, cows and other large animals would be brought inside during the harshest months. The heat generated by a single cow equals roughly that of a small wood stove, making these arrangements thermally efficient, if not particularly pleasant by modern hygiene standards. This cohabitation with animals wasn't just about warmth, it was also economical. Keeping animals alive through winter was essential for medieval agriculture and transportation, so sharing human shelter and heat with valuable livestock protected important assets while providing additional warmth for the human inhabitants. Number 7. The Central Hearth Revolution. Can you imagine your entire home revolving around a single heat source? For medieval people, the hearth was more than just a place to cook. It was the literal and figurative heart of the home, a technological innovation that transformed winter survival. The earliest medieval houses featured a central hearth, essentially an open fire in the middle of the main room, with smoke escaping through a hole in the roof. This arrangement maximized the heat distribution throughout the space, allowing warmth to radiate in all directions. People would arrange their activities in concentric circles around this heat source, with essential winter tasks taking place within the warm zone near the fire. The central hearth design wasn't without its problems. Smoke filled the upper portion of the room, making the air quality poor by modern standards. However, medieval people adapted to this environment, often sitting or working on low stools to stay below the worst of the smoke. The soot that accumulated on the ceiling and walls actually provided additional insulation and helped preserve wooden structural elements from insect damage, an unintended benefit of an imperfect heating system. As medieval architecture evolved, particularly in the homes of the wealthy, the central hearth gradually moved to the wall and developed into more sophisticated fireplaces with chimneys. This improvement in smoke management came with a thermal disadvantage. Wall fireplaces couldn't radiate heat in all directions like central hearths could. To compensate, medieval engineers designed increasingly elaborate fireplace shapes with angled sides to reflect more heat back into the room. The hearth served multiple functions beyond heating. It provided light during the dark winter days, served as the household cooking center, and created a community gathering space where families would spend the long winter evenings working, telling stories, and passing down traditions. This multifunctional approach to heating reflects the integrated, holistic worldview of medieval life, where practical needs and social customs were inseparably interwoven. Number 6. Insulation innovation. Think bubble wrap and fiberglass are modern inventions. The medieval approach to insulation might surprise you with its ingenuity and effectiveness, using readily available natural materials to create thermal barriers against the winter chill. Rushes and straw covered many medieval floors, providing a crucial layer of insulation against the cold ground. Unlike modern disposable products, these natural floor coverings weren't simply tossed out when dirty, they were layered. Fresh rushes would be strewn on top as the lower layers compacted, creating an increasingly effective thermal barrier as winter progressed. Sometimes these rushes would be mixed with herbs like mint, lavender, or pennyroyal, which released pleasant scents when walked upon and helped repel insects. Wall insulation took various forms depending on regional availability of materials. In timber-framed houses, the spaces between wooden structural elements would be filled with wattle and daub, a mixture of woven sticks, wattle, plastered with a combination of clay, straw, animal dung, and other binding materials, daub. This composite material created surprisingly effective thermal mass, helping to maintain stable indoor temperatures. In colder regions like Scandinavia and the alpine areas, moss gathered from forests served as an excellent insulating material. Dried moss would be packed between logs in wooden structures or used to seal gaps in stone buildings. The natural properties of moss, its ability to trap air and resist moisture, made it particularly effective for winter insulation. Windows posed a particular challenge in medieval homes. Glass was expensive and usually reserved for churches and the homes of the very wealthy. Most dwellings used oiled parchment, thin animal horn, or wooden shutters to cover window openings. During the coldest months, additional insulation in the form of wool cloth might be hung over these coverings to further reduce heat loss. Even clothing served as personal insulation. The famous medieval layered look wasn't a fashion statement but a practical approach to thermal regulation. Multiple layers of linen, wool, and fur allowed people to adjust their personal insulation as they moved between the relatively warmer indoor spaces and the freezing outdoors. Number 5. Hot drink traditions. Did you realize that many of our favorite winter beverages have medieval origins? The customs surrounding hot drinks during the Middle Ages weren't just about taste, they represented sophisticated understanding of how internal warming affects the body's ability to cope with cold environments. Mulled wine stands out as perhaps the most famous medieval winter warmer. This wasn't simply wine served hot, it was carefully prepared with specific spices believed to possess heating properties according to medieval medical theory. Cinnamon, cloves, and ginger were classified as hot spices in the Galenic medical system, thought to increase internal heat and counteract the cold qualities of winter. When combined with the warming effects of alcohol, these spiced concoctions were considered powerful medicine against winter chills. For those who couldn't afford wine, ales and beers were often warmed and spiced during winter. A popular variation included dropping a hot poker directly from the fire into the tankard, instantly heating the drink and slightly caramelizing the sugars, an early predecessor to today's mulled cider. The ceremonial aspects of sharing these heated beverages strengthened community bonds during the harshest season when mutual support was essential for survival. Children and those avoiding alcohol might enjoy warm milk mixed with honey, a comforting drink that provided both hydration and calories needed to maintain body heat. Wealthy medieval households sometimes added exotic and expensive spices like nutmeg or cardamom to these milk drinks, creating luxury versions of what we might recognize as primitive hot chocolate or chai. Herbal infusions served both medicinal and warming purposes during medieval winters. Mint, sage, and thyme steeped in hot water created steaming beverages that warmed both the hands that held the cup and the body that consumed the drink. These herbal preparations often used plants specifically harvested and dried during summer and autumn in anticipation of winter needs. The social rituals surrounding these heated beverages created psychological warmth to complement their physical benefits. Winter drinking customs brought people together around shared warmth sources, combining physical comfort with the emotional security of community during the challenging winter months. Number 4. Crafty clothing layers. Ever wondered why medieval people in paintings always seem so bundled up, even indoors? Their approach to winter clothing reveals sophisticated layering techniques that created effective personal climate control systems without modern synthetic materials. The foundation of medieval winter wear was linen, worn closest to the skin. While this might seem counterintuitive, wouldn't will be warmer. Linen served crucial functions in the medieval wardrobe. Its ability to wick moisture away from the body prevented the chill that comes from sweat freezing against the skin during winter activities. Linen undergarments were worn year-round, providing a consistent base layer that could be supplemented as temperatures dropped. Over this foundation came wool, the miracle fiber of medieval life. Wool retains approximately 80% of its insulating properties even when wet, making it ideal for the often damp European climate. Medieval wool wasn't the itchy, rough material many imagine. Carefully processed wool could be quite soft, and the natural lanolin content provided some water resistance. Multiple layers of wool garments in varying weights created adjustable insulation that could be adapted to different activities and temperature conditions. For those who could afford them, fur-lined garments represented the pinnacle of winter comfort. Furs weren't just status symbols, they provided unmatched insulation against the bitterest cold. Squirrel fur was particularly prized for its lightweight warmth and was often used to line hoods and cloaks. Fox, rabbit, and sheepskin served similar purposes for those of more modest means, while aristocrats might display luxury furs like sable or ermine. Medieval people paid particular attention to extremities, hands, feet, and heads, understanding that controlling heat loss from these areas was crucial for overall warmth. Hoods were often attached to cloaks or jackets rather than existing as separate items, eliminating gaps where cold air could penetrate. Gloves or mittens might be lined with fur or wool, and multiple layers of socks, sometimes 3 or 4 pairs, would be worn inside leather shoes or boots. Perhaps most ingeniously, medieval clothing was designed for micro-adjustments throughout the day. Sleeves might be separate pieces that could be added or removed as needed, and laced openings allowed garments to be loosened during physical activity and tightened during rest periods. This adaptive approach to clothing demonstrates a practical understanding of how the body's heating needs fluctuate throughout daily activities. Number 3. Communal heating strategies. Did medieval communities understand the power of shared resources better than we do today? The cooperative heating practices that developed during the Middle Ages reveal sophisticated social adaptations to winter challenges that many modern communities have forgotten. Public bathhouses represented one of the most popular communal warming experiences in medieval towns. While we often associate medieval Europe with infrequent bathing, public baths remained important social institutions throughout much of the period, particularly in urban areas. During winter, these establishments offered respite from the cold, with heated pools and steam rooms that provided thorough warming that would be difficult to achieve in private homes. The social nature of these baths, where people gathered, gossiped, and conducted business, combined practical warmth with community bonding. Communal baking provided another ingenious shared heating strategy. Most medieval households couldn't afford to operate their own ovens daily, as heating these brick or stone structures required significant fuel. Instead, communities developed shared ovens where families would take turns baking their bread, usually weekly. The designated baking day often became washing day as well, as the residual heat from the oven could be used to heat water for laundry. Families would schedule winter activities around these communal heat sources, maximizing the benefit from each precious fire. Religious institutions played a crucial role in winter warming. Churches and monasteries, often the only stone buildings with large interior spaces in medieval communities, provided gathering places where the collective body heat of the congregation created warming pockets in an otherwise cold world. While spiritual devotion was the primary purpose, the practical warmth benefits of gathering for regular services during winter months can't be overlooked as a survival strategy. Guild halls and communal meeting houses in larger towns often maintained fires throughout the winter where members of the community could warm themselves. For the elderly or those living alone, these communal spaces provided essential access to heat they might not be able to maintain in private dwellings. The social obligation to care for vulnerable community members during winter was formalized in many medieval town charters, recognizing that winter survival was a collective responsibility. Even humble taverns served as important communal heating centers. Beyond providing warmed beverages, they offered spaces where heat generated by many bodies in close proximity created comfortable environments during freezing weather. The tavern's role as a winter warming station explains why medieval communities were often surprisingly tolerant of establishments that might otherwise have been viewed as morally questionable. They fulfilled essential survival functions during the coldest months. Number 2. Hot stone technology. Can a simple rock really keep you warm through a freezing night? Medieval people developed surprisingly sophisticated systems using heated stones for personal and space heating that demonstrate remarkable understanding of thermal mass principles. The hot stone foot warmer represents one of the simplest yet most effective personal heating devices. Stones of appropriate size, typically flat river rocks that retained heat well, would be placed near the hearth to warm gradually. Once heated, these stones would be wrapped in cloth and placed at the feet while working at sedentary tasks like spinning or reading. The slow release of radiant heat from the stone provided hours of warmth with no additional fuel consumption. In bed, similar stone arrangements would be placed under the covers near the feet, providing gentle warmth throughout the night as they gradually released their stored heat. For traveling in cold weather, soapstone hand warmers offered portable heat. These specially carved stone devices, often shaped like small boxes or spheres with hollowed centers, would be heated in the morning before a journey and then carried in pockets or muffs. The dense soapstone retained heat for hours, providing a reliable hand-warming source during winter travels. Some elaborate versions featured decorative carvings and metal handles or cases, turning a practical heating device into a fashion accessory for the wealthy. Culinary applications of hot stone technology extended the heating benefits to mealtime. Bread dough was sometimes placed on heated stones beside the fire when oven access wasn't available. The direct contact with the hot stone created a crisp crust while radiating enough heat to bake the interior. For liquid foods like soups and stews, heated stones could be carefully dropped directly into cooking pots to quickly raise temperatures without waiting for the pot to heat from the outside, an early version of immersion heating. Churches and large meeting halls employed larger-scale stone heating systems for warming spaces that couldn't accommodate open flames. Large stones or bricks would be heated in a separate fire and then brought inside in metal containers, radiating heat throughout the space without smoke or fire risk. This technique was particularly important in libraries or document storage areas where open flames posed dangers to irreplaceable manuscripts. The most sophisticated medieval stone heating systems resembled modern thermal mass concepts in sustainable architecture. In regions with adequate stone resources, thick interior walls would be positioned to absorb heat during the day from whatever sun-penetrated winter windows or from nearby hearth fires. These stone masses would then slowly release this stored heat throughout the night, moderating temperature swings and providing gentle background warmth with remarkable efficiency. Number 1. Architectural heat traps. How did medieval builders create warm spaces without modern insulation? The architectural features of medieval buildings reveal sophisticated passive solar design principles that modern green builders are only now rediscovering. The medieval solar room, from which we get our modern term solarium, represented the pinnacle of passive heating design. These south-facing chambers, typically reserved for the lady of the house and her activities, featured larger windows than other rooms specifically to capture winter sunlight. The floors and walls of these rooms often incorporated dark stone that would absorb solar radiation during daylight hours and release it slowly after sunset. The medieval solar combined the functions of a living room, office, and personal retreat in a space designed to remain naturally warmer than the rest of the structure. Window placement throughout medieval buildings followed careful consideration of solar patterns. Eastern windows captured morning sun when it was most needed to dispel the overnight chill, while western windows were often smaller to prevent overheating in the afternoon. Northern exposures featured the smallest openings, minimizing heat loss through these permanently shaded facades. This directional window sizing strategy remained consistent across everything from humble cottages to grand cathedrals, showing how deeply these passive solar principles penetrated medieval building culture. Internal layouts responded directly to heating challenges. In multi-story structures, the most frequently used daytime living spaces were typically positioned on upper floors where they would benefit from heat rising from lower levels. Kitchens and work areas that generated heat through activity were strategically positioned to allow their excess warmth to flow into adjacent living spaces. Sleeping chambers were often tucked into the center of buildings, surrounded by other rooms that buffered them from exterior walls and their associated heat loss. The famous medieval Great Hall exemplified smart thermal design. These large central spaces featured high ceilings that seem counterintuitive for heat conservation, but actually created important thermal stratification. The highest, coldest air remained well above the occupied zone, while the natural convection created by central hearths established circular airflow patterns that distributed heat effectively throughout the lived-in lower portion of the space. Even the iconic thick walls of medieval construction served sophisticated thermal functions beyond their structural roles. The substantial mass of stone or dense wattle and daub walls created significant thermal lag, absorbing heat during warmer periods and releasing it slowly during colder times. This moderating effect made interior temperatures more stable than outside conditions, reducing both the peaks and valleys of the daily temperature cycle. Do these ingenious medieval solutions make you look at your own home's heating system differently? Could some of these ancient techniques inspire more sustainable approaches to comfort in our modern world?